Hi, Epic Recaps here, and today I want to share a touching story about a teen girl who learns how to care for her deaf family without sacrificing her own happiness. The movie begins with Ruby Rossi, a senior in high school, working on a fishing boat in the mornings before school, with her father Frank and brother Leo. Singing to herself, she's the only hearing member in her deaf family, and is relied upon to translate for them. When she returns with news that the price offered for their catch isn't as high as they expected, Leo suggests to Frank that they sell directly to suppliers, which Frank dismisses. Ruby bids them farewell and makes her way to school, where she catches up on sleep during class. Afterward, when Ruby's best friend Gertie updates her on her latest boy conquests, a group of kids walk by and snidely comments about the fishy smell in the hall. Used to being made fun of, she watches on as a girl flirts with a boy named Miles, whom she has a crush on. When she overhears Miles signing up for choir class, Ruby quickly does the same, much to her friend's surprise. When her parents arrive to pick her up, she's mortified when they blare hip-hop from the truck, which is Frank and her mother Jackie's favorite, as they can only hear the bass from the music. The embarrassment continues when she accompanies her parents to a doctor's appointment, and has to translate that Frank is suffering from jock itch. Told that it's common among fishermen, her parents are ordered not to have sex for 2 weeks, which they protest. Back home, Ruby attempts to do school work amidst the loud noises her family makes. Annoyed with them, Frank lightens the mood when he lets out a loud fart at the dinner table. The next day at choir class, their teacher Bernardo Villalobos instructs each student to sing so he can determine their vocal types. When it's her turn, Ruby gets nervous and runs out of the class. She makes her way to the water and, singing to herself, Ruby lets out her angelic voice. Returning home, she watches as her parents argue over money and learns their bills are mounting up, to which Frank suggests they sell their boat. Making matters worse, the next day, the fishermen learn that they have to shell out $800 for regulation agents to oversee that they're complying with the rules on their boats. Back at school, Ruby apologizes to Bernardo and explains that she ran out because she's been made fun of her entire life. Giving her another chance, he's so impressed with her voice that he pairs Ruby with Miles for a duet at the fall concert, and instructs them to practice. Afterward at the docks, Ruby interjects when Leo sells their fish at a lower price than they're worth. Back outside, Leo argues that Ruby made him look dumb, and Frank breaks them up, telling them that their family sticks together. At school the next day, Bernardo is unimpressed when he hears Ruby and Miles sing, ordering them to practice together, not separately. He asks Ruby about her plans after graduation. Learning that her family can't afford college, he suggests she audition for Berklee College of Music for a scholarship, and offers to tutor her. Warning her not to waste his time, she happily accepts. Returning home, she tells Jackie the news, who doubts Ruby's singing abilities, asking if she would be a painter if Jackie was blind. Ruby is hurt and tells her mother it's not always about her. Elsewhere, Leo suggests to Frank that they start a co-op to sell their fish, and his father dismisses the idea because the other fishermen see them as a joke. Taking off to join the other men at the bar, Leo is quiet as he is unable to communicate with them. Getting a drink spilled on him, he confronts the man and gets into a fight. Afterward, Gertie, who works there, communicates with him via text message, which leads to a makeout session in the back room. Meanwhile, Miles and Ruby head back to her house to work on the duet. Embarrassed that her house is in shambles, the pair get to practicing and are interrupted by the sounds of her parents having sex. She's humiliated, and it gets even worse when Jackie and Frank sit the teens down for a sex talk, which Ruby has to translate. At school the next day, another student makes fun of the sex incident, and she confronts Miles for telling the other kids. Insisting he told one person and didn't mean any harm by it, Ruby is hurt and walks out. Later on, she practices her audition piece with Bernardo, and recounts how she was made fun of for sounding like a deaf person at a young age. Encouraging her to use her anger, he gets her to sing the piece beautifully. Afterward at a council meeting, Ruby translates for Frank, who tells them to suck his dick and decides to go with Leo's idea, offering to sell their fish for double the current rate. Back home, Jackie is stunned and Leo is excited to finally get a chance to be accepted by the other fishermen. Concerned that they can't communicate with others, Frank offers up Ruby as the solution. With Ruby's help, the new business gets underway with Leo and Frank overseeing the selling of fish, while Jackie struggles to fit in with the other women. She watches on as Ruby attempts to balance her family's business with her singing. Still not speaking with Miles, Ruby gets into trouble for showing up late for her lessons with Bernardo, and warns her he'll stop tutoring her if she shows up late again. At school, Miles tries to apologize again and to her surprise, admits that he envies her family because they actually love each other, not like his own family. When she walks away, he threatens to text her every minute until she forgives him. At work, Frank and Jackie are asked to be interviewed by a news crew. When Ruby says she has to attend practice, Jackie accuses her of wanting the family to fail. Out of guilt, she stays and translates for them, and rushing to her lesson afterward, Bernardo doesn't answer the door. The next day, when she tries to apologize, he tells her he doesn't want to bother with someone who's too afraid to try, and she admits that she's never done anything on her own without her family. Back home, Ruby argues with her family and is frustrated with being their translator for life, and not having time for herself. Learning that she is auditioning for college, Jackie is worried about losing their baby, and Frank wisely tells her that Ruby was never that, always having to care for them. Still angry with them, Ruby decides not to go to work the next morning and texts Miles instead. An agent shows up at the dock and accompanies Frank and Leo as they head out for the day's catch. Meanwhile, Ruby takes Miles to her water spot, and they spend the morning swimming and playing around, which eventually leads to a kiss. Elsewhere, the agent realizes that Frank and Leo are deaf, and with no hearing worker on deck, she calls in the Coast Guard and the boat is detained. Arriving home, Jackie accuses Ruby of letting her family down when she didn't show up for work. Unable to afford a deckhand, Ruby is frustrated that she has to be everything for them. The next day at the hearing, the family learns that their license is suspended unless they pay the hefty fines. Unable to disappoint her family, Ruby agrees to give up college and stay to help. This angers Leo and he sarcastically hails Ruby the savior, upset that they have to rely on her so much. Later that night, Jackie gives Ruby a dress she bought her for the fall concert. Told that Leo feels left out, Ruby tells her that she's the one that is the outsider. Jackie shares that she selfishly wished Ruby was born deaf, worried that she would fail her daughter as a deaf mom, but now admits how proud she is of Ruby as she holds her in her arms. The next day, Ruby talks to Leo and he encourages her to follow through with the college audition. Told by Gertie that she has a beautiful voice, he tells her he's tired of being coddled, and is ready to lead the family. When Ruby asks who will communicate with the customers, Leo suggests people need to adjust to them, not the other way around. Later at the concert, the family attends but is unable to hear Ruby. Looking around the auditorium, they see that Ruby's singing has an overwhelming effect on the audience, and they beam with pride. After the performance, Bernardo approaches Jackie and Frank, and attempts to communicate with the sign language he learned from YouTube. He accidentally tells them to screw off instead, and they all share a laugh. When he tells them they're making a mistake by holding Ruby back, she doesn't translate the message. Arriving home, Ruby joins Frank outside, and wondering what her song was about, he asks her to sing it for him, which she does. The next morning, Ruby is surprised when the family insists on taking her to the audition. Frank tells her if they're kicking her out, they're going to do it together as a family. Running into Miles, she learns that Bernardo just left, and that he fumbled his audition. When her name is called, the family is told they have to stay outside and wait. Taking the stage, Ruby realizes she forgot her sheet music, and is about to leave when Bernardo announces that he's a Berkeley alumni and can take the stage with her. Meanwhile outside, Frank points towards an entrance upstairs and the family sneaks into the auditorium as Ruby begins to sing. She struggles with her voice and Bernardo purposefully fumbles the chords, which gives Ruby a chance to start over. This time, she sings with emotion, and with a soaring voice, she begins signing the words to her family and they proudly watch on. In the weeks following the audition, Frank hires and trains a deckhand and the business continues to do well, with Jackie bonding with the other wives. Ruby and Miles spend their days together, and even teaches him sign language. The family wait to hear from the admissions office, and learns that Ruby has been accepted to the music school, much to theirs and Bernardo's joy. When it's time to say goodbye, Ruby runs back for one last hug and driving away, she signs goodbye to them. Let us know what you thought about this movie in the comments below and remember to click like and subscribe. Check out the next movie about a woman who has to spend life behind bars, all out of love for her baby sister.